All right, this is the Cine-mechanic, and you're listening to Under the Hood with the Cine-mechanic. I'm your host, the Cine-mechanic. I said that 3 times. I have a special guest today, Mr. Nick Murphy, an old friend of mine from film school. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful. It's good to hear your voice. Very soothing. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excellent. I'm excellent now that you said that. Yeah, I wanted to have you on because we go way back, film
Yes,
school
sir.
days.
20 years now, I think.
Oh yeah, God, don't remind me.
Yeah.
We're getting old, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that's the point of today's broadcast. I wanted to give people kind of a snapshot and insight into the creative filmmaking struggling process, which is all one thing. I mean, I think there was a quote that, and I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but filmmaking is what 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. And I don't remember who said that, but it really always stuck with me.
Probably a PA and didn't get credit for it, you know?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to have you on, man, is because when we went to school together, you had this tremendous energy and drive and tenacity. You seem to be a person who had a very strong will to persevere and take the knocks that the film business readily gives every person that try and gets involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, because it is a special skill that you need. Many have come and gone from Hollywood, and you're one of the few who's stuck around and tried to make their way through the maze. So I wanted to let's start from the beginning. And when I say that, I don't mean like the birthing room or anything. Right. I mean, take us back to, let's just say, take us back to when you knew you wanted to do this filmmaking thing.
Wow. Okay. The beginning. Well, that might go back to the birthing room as far as I know, because I've always wanted to do this since I was tiny. I think I knew when I was younger, I always did stories. I would write and draw constantly. I know when I finally figured out around 8 or 9, probably around the time Back to the Future came out, I was like, oh, directors do this. They make this movie. I want to do that. I want to tell stories just like these people do. And I suddenly started getting obsessed. And so I didn't have access to a camera because I grew up quite financially strapped. And I had a hardworking single mom. And so I would use my grandmother's audio cassette tape recorder to make audio films. And I would teach myself how to tell stories on cassette.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I would just record sound effects, and I would record, and we did so many. We even had a franchise called Ninja Kitties. Granted, we were 11 at the time, but there were 4 of them, and that might come back one day. I don't know. But that was a thing. And then I started writing scripts around that time too. I wrote a really, really amazing surprise that hasn't been made yet. I don't know what Nintendo's thinking. Legend of Zelda screenplay when I was 14 that had Arnold Schwarzenegger as this direct descendant of Link in Hyrule. I just, wow. I was just constantly writing and constantly doing stuff. I remember in 3rd grade, I wanted to take my grandma's Polaroid camera. And then I don't know, this is going to age me quite a bit, but do you remember in school where they had those projectors that were big and bulky and shone straight down and then onto the piece of paper, and then put that piece of paper onto the board? I wanted to use one of those to put the Polaroids onto the projector, and then I was going to go ahead and do the audio separately on cassette, and then make a movie using still images and audio. And I was like, that's the way it's going to work. And then even in 6th grade, because I moved schools a lot, I went to 11, 12 different schools by 7th grade. So I didn't it was hard to make friends. So I was always by myself. I was always in my own imagination. And I remember in 6th grade, I started drawing this character called Kid Cool. And I'd somehow convinced this class of kids I didn't even really know to practice the fight scenes at recess. And I started giving everybody parts and stuff. And this one kid was gonna borrow her uncle's camcorder, and this just went on forever. And I started begging my mom and dad and grandma for a VHS camera every year for any holiday, Flag Day, Groundhog Day, birthday, Christmas. And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And this went up like 3 years. And then finally around, and I'll wrap this up here because this concludes the start. Christmas of 1993, my grandma and I drive down to visit my mom. And she gets, all I had that year was a big box and then, a stocking. And she's like, okay, we're going to give you your Christmas gift early. And she hands me this huge box, December 24th. I tear it open, and sitting on my lap is this giant Hitachi VHS brand new video camera. Wow. And I was floored. I was absolutely floored. And I think I cried. I don't remember. I think I just tore it out of the box, started filming right away. and it turns out, and I'm gonna try not to cry here, but
no, go for it.
Yeah, sure. Let those tears fly, struggling filmmaker man. I want to relate to your plight. No, but it was my mom worked. There's a funny story to that camera. My mom was working 2 double shifts at the seafood packing plant she was working at in Gulfport, Mississippi, and she put that camera in layaway. Well, when she went to go pick it up a few days before Christmas, that camera had been sold. And my mom lost her mind. She was like, I'm coming in here to make the final payment on this for my son. This is a gift for my son. He wants to be a filmmaker. I need to have this camera. I've been working so hard. And the manager went back and brought out a better camera that was a couple $100 more than the one that she had put down originally. And so I got a better camera out of it. And I started making movies immediately and have never stopped since. That was 30 years ago.
Wow.
27 years ago.
That's I mean, that sounds, pretty typical of the stories I've heard of people who, they end up, falling in love with film and filmmaking and stuff. And you mentioned Back to the Future. So what filmmakers were you kind of ensconced with at this point? I mean, did you have a guide in terms of filmmaking heroes at that point?
Yeah, that guide got more distinctive as I started getting older and started just absorbing movies and television and comic books and video games and anything pop culture. I started to find my own voice, so therefore I started to find voices that reflected what I started to like. And I know that early on, of course, there's the greats. James Cameron, I loved because I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I thought that those two together made amazing films. So he was a huge influence for me. Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, John Woo, Cameron Crowe, John Hughes, of course, John Hughes, Robert Zemeckis, all these wonderful filmmakers you grow up with. And then as you get older and you start to see more and more films, you start to fall in love with basically everything. So I just love cinema. I watch everything from foreign films to cheesy movies that are made for $5,000. It doesn't matter to me. As long as you're telling a story and I can get an idea what that story is, I'm gonna watch your film.
Yeah. So I mean, this was back around 93, 94, you said, when you started this?
1993 is when I started Spoon Pictures, which is, I guess, the production company that we've been kind of making the movies under that banner for the last 20 something.
Yeah, because I remember that was the year. So I think it was Reservoir Dogs was 92, and then Pulp Fiction was 94, and I can't remember what El Mariachi was. I think El Mariachi was 92. I want to say 93 to 92.
I think you're correct. It was 92, and then Desperado was 92, and then Desperado was 95. Yeah, 95. Yeah.
Because that was when I started to, just to interject my little thing here. I basically I got the filmmaking bug. I got the film love bug pretty early, but I got the filmmaking bug specifically probably around that time because we had moved to Florida from California. My dad's job had downsized, and we were looking for somewhere else to live, and we moved to Florida, and then one of my teachers, weirdly enough, showed me the scene in Pulp Fiction where Christopher Walken tells the watch story. And I was 15. I was 15, and I was like, the first thought was like, wait, can you get fired for doing this? My second thought was, this is one of the most amazing things I've seen in a movie, because I had been watching a steady diet of Hollywood films at that point. I mean, you know, like you, it was James Cameron, it was Zemeckis, it was the 80s.
Spielberg, it was
Spielberg stuff, and then I saw
Scorsese.
This like weird, Scorsese, and then I saw this weird, you know, sardonic kind of just crazy thing in this movie, and I was like, well, what is this? And I watched it. It was Pulp Fiction, and then I started to get into the 90s indie filmmaking scene.
Oh God, me too. I remember when I discovered Kevin Smith for the first time and I was a huge Kevin Smith fan for a very long time, still very much am. Love him. But at the time, like when I discovered Clerks at the video store, it was like in Missouri where my friends and I were going to school, and I started watching movies. It opened up my whole world. I'm like, you're kidding me? Like this guy did it. We could do it. We're doing it too. We're doing it too. You know, just like, that's so cool.
If there's a movie that ever shows you that anybody can do this, it's Clerks.
Well, that is also sort of, I feel, a little disingenuous to Clerks, because what was interesting is like you can see a lot of strong structure there.
Oh, sure.
You know, and his character work, and that just blows everything else out of the water. I remember actually, I finally got to make a lifelong, I'm going to side quest just for a second. I got to make a lifelong journey to the actual stash in Red Bank that he owns recently, last year, pre-COVID.
Oh, wow.
You know, I happened to be on the East Coast, and it was a lifelong journey that myself and my friend Paul, who's no longer here, we wanted to make it. So it was really nice to go there. And when I went to Red Bank, I was struck just how similar it was to my small hometown in Jackson, Missouri, where I was making movies too, around the same exact time that he was. And I was like, man, that is so cool. Like, look at this tiny little town. Like, he convinced everybody here to come together and make a movie. And I know how hard that is, because I just did the same thing with my recent movie and all the movies before it. So yeah, it was really kind of cool to like go there. And I've met him a few times. I even worked at the Secret Stash briefly.
Wow.
He was my boss for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And it was like everything you kind of wanted, you know. Kind of like, it was just as cool. It was cool being there as a fan. I got to meet, you know, because we were in Westwood, we had a lot of famous people coming to the store all the time. And one time, J.J. Abrams walks in.
And was this before or after? Like, was this around like Alias or with Lost? What period is this?
05, 06, 07, 07.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Because I had just done a fan film that I just wrapped that a few months before. It was called Tomb Raider: Tears of the Dragon, and it was on G4 Attack of the Show a couple times, and it was actually doing kind of pretty. It was getting a lot of attention online and in media and stuff, and it was kind of cool. And we didn't expect any of that because it was the first Tomb Raider fan film ever made. You know, we were just kind of doing our own thing. You know, like no one asked us, no one gave us permission. It started off extremely small, a crew of 3 people, and now you know. So I was just kind of there, and I just wrapped another feature right after that called What Comes Next. I had 2 movies in my pocket. I'm just sort of like, you know, working as many jobs as I can to pay rent. You know how it is out here, and not succeeding at any of them. And JJ walks in one day at the Secret Stash, and it's pretty dead. And I know exactly who he is. This is around, it was right when he directed that episode of The Office, and then he had done Mission Impossible 3 right before that.
Okay.
And so, like, when he walked in, I was like, oh my God, it's J.J. Abrams. And I went to the back, and I told my manager, Brian, that JJ had walked into the store. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, dude, it's him. It's him and his kids and stuff. He's like, okay, cool. Just go up there and, you know, be cool. I'm like, I'm going to be cool. Because Brian knew I was a filmmaker. And he didn't want me to be like, fanboying over JJ or embarrassing Kevin or some shit.
Right.
And so, I went back up to the counter and like JJ's there, and I was like, "Oh, hey, man." He was like, "Hey," I'm like, "You're JJ Abrams." Like, I'm so fired, man. And he's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm a big fan." I was like, da, 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 da. And he's like, "Yeah, dude, I was just texting Kevin. Hey, man, I'm in your fucking store." I'm like, "Oh, wow. Okay. He has a direct line to my boss. I better really be cool."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so a really interesting story came from this. And I think I can talk about it now because it's long since passed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Go for it.
Because I think the NDA I signed was like, it's 13 years ago. And I don't think nothing ever really came from it. So I'm going to go ahead and talk briefly about it. JJ was there and like we started talking and he says to me, we started talking about film, started talking about Battlestar, started talking about The Office, started talking about everything. He's really cool. And as we're talking, his son walks up and he says, "Hey, Dad, no offense, but like working in a comic book store is way cooler than being a director."
Wow.
Everybody laughed. And then I was like, "Yeah, man." I looked at JJ. I was like, "Hey, dude, if you want to trade for a day, I'll just go hang out over there and you can just hang out here." And he got a kick out of that too. And anyway, at the end, I have him sign an Alias magazine that we have in the store. Yeah. And then I was like, "Hey, dude, I just want to let you know, from one filmmaker to another, keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiration." And he was like, "Oh, wait, you're a director?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "What have you done?" And that silence that you heard was the silence I had because I didn't know what to tell JJ fucking Abrams what I've done. I can curse on your podcast, right? Did I already do that?
I forgot to tell you, man. No, of course you can.
Anyway, so I was like, "Yeah, dude, yeah, I'm a filmmaker." And he asked me what I've done, and I was like, "I just did a Tomb Raider fan film that's doing okay, and it's an action fan film that we did, and then I just wrapped a romantic comedy like in the style of John Hughes called What Comes Next. It's a feature, and we made it for $700." And he goes, and this is like 07, and he was like, "Oh, that's awesome." He was like, "Do you know my production company, Bad Robot?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, we're looking for directors. Like, we want to like find directors and like have them come over to the thing and make some shorts and stuff like that, and then see what we can get going." I just nod my head and I look right at him. Farrell, you know what I told him?
What?
Okay, that's cool. Do you need me to come PA on set or something? Because I thought he was asking me to come work on the sets that he had already chosen the directors, that he wasn't asking me to come do it, that he was asking me to come like be involved somehow. And I just spit out the first thing that I thought I was qualified for because he was looking at me as a filmmaker. The problem was, and I think this is a problem for a lot of us, I didn't see myself that way in front of him. I had really bad, what do they call that term?
Stage fright?
No, it's like, imposter syndrome.
Oh, right.
I was struck with sincere imposter syndrome because even though I had been making movies for a long time, and even though J.J. Abrams asked if I was a filmmaker, I didn't believe that at the time. And so I said, "Oh, yeah." And then he goes, no, we need directors. I'm like, "Oh." So we worked it out, and I sent in, over the course of several months, I talked it over with Bad Robot, sent in a bunch of stuff, and ultimately it didn't work. I don't think he ever got to see them, unfortunately. There was a lot of red tape and a lot of weirdness, and I think it just ended up at some assistant at some agency somewhere, and then they just passed on it. Because when I called, they were like, "Oh, we're going to have to pass." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" JJ just wanted to watch these movies because he asked me about them. And they're like, yeah, we can't turn Tomb Raider into a TV show or anything. I'm like, "I didn't ask you to turn Tomb Raider into a TV show. That's a calling card, dude."
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. It's like, but yeah, that was like one of those many, many moments I've had in the last, since I've been out in this business for this long. It's one of the many moments that have been like an almost opportunity.
Well, speaking of the imposter syndrome, I mean, even I was watching an interview with Tarantino, And he said he had that even when he was big. I mean, he was like, oh, I kept waiting for somebody to come tap me on the shoulder and go, who are you? Get the fuck out of here. Like, and to hear that come from him was really enlightening, because, you know, you
Yeah.
think you have this thing in your head where you go, oh, when I'm successful, it'll be all good and I'll have it all figured out and it'll be smooth. It's like that's I think people underestimate the nature of success.
Right.
I mean, success can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but if you become successful in an external sense, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll feel successful inside.
Correct. And I think that that's where the win is. I think if artists can take the inside to match what everyone else thinks the outside is, I think that's when the art tends to shine brightest. And it's because we don't believe in ourselves, because we're too self-critical. And we're going to tear down our work over and over and over. I don't know about anybody else, but this is what I do. And, you know, because like I spent over 3,300 hours editing my last feature. I just kept tinkering at it, you know, it's because it's just one of those things. And, you know, I'm not a slow editor by any means. I'm very fast, if you remember, from back in film school days.
Yeah.
So it just becomes one of those things. It's like, this movie is only as good as the work I put into it. This edit is only as good as the time and dedication that I put into it. And so, you know, it just, but like going back to that, I think where part of that imposter syndrome comes from is the lie that Hollywood sells you when they tell you to come out here and go after your own dreams.
Right.
See, because what they're selling you is a marketing ploy. Every podcast you ever listen to, everyone that I've ever listened to, where there's some writer on there, a director, or someone who has a project that I'm really interested in hearing what they have to say about. I know that what's his face, Jeff, gosh, I forget his last name, but he had a podcast at the LA Film School for a while. What was his last name? It was like a writing podcast. It was so good. Gosh, I can't remember his last name. I'm drawing on, but the point is even on some of those, when they would always ask, you know, how did you get this project that suddenly everyone passed on to be great? Or how did you get to this point where you are now? They always gloss over the failures, the rejections, how hard it was. And then it's like everyone on that panel is afraid, if I tell them how it happened, then like my job is on the line, you know, or like, I don't want to give away my secret, because the secret is there is no secret.
Right.
There is no direct path. And the problem is like filmmakers now, the up and coming filmmakers who are, you know, have access to the equipment we never had access to, which is a big reason why you and I had to go to that film school back in the day. Nowadays they do, and they have YouTube, and they can immediately go make a movie right now, which is phenomenal. The problem is everyone is looking for that direct path. And I want to give an example. There was a filmmaker on Reddit who, an r/filmmakers subreddit, had posted, hey, we made this movie, and here's how we did it, and here's how we got these famous people in it, and you can too. And it was so indicative of their own personal experience that it did not apply to the majority of filmmakers who were reading it. Right. And, you know, because it's like what worked for them is not the show, but they were so high on their own supply that they figured, oh yeah, this is how we did it and you can do it too. And it's just like, no one's going to have that same result.
Right. Yeah. It's, you know, the saying goes, I mean, this is kind of part of that. It's not directly part of it, but it reminds me of it. You know, the whole, if it was easy, everybody would do it. I think that the correct saying is, if it was simple or direct, everybody would do it. And a lot of people are trying to do it, but I think you would see a lot more success, quote unquote, if a lot of these things actually worked, because a lot of them don't work. It's a long, circuitous path that doesn't have maps. It has maybe the vaguest of maps, but you can barely read it. It's torn, it's dirty, you know, and then there's things in the path that maybe have been built or changed up that you're not aware of, so you can fall into traps that they don't tell you about. You know, I spent years falling into various traps. And it's not just the falling into the traps, it's the psychological toll that it takes on you as well. And sometimes you get to the finish line, or you get a project going. A lot of people, that's some of the reason a lot of people don't make more things, is because they don't want to do it anymore.
Exactly. It is exhausting. I mean, I can't tell you, like, the amount of sacrifice, struggle, and obstacles that we faced making All Night Skate for $10,000 was insanity. And like I don't even know how we pulled that off when I look at it now, and it's almost done, and it's been 3 years. And it's like, I remember in pre-production, I had $4 in my bank account when I started making that movie. That's how broke I was. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let that number stop me from fucking going out and doing it, because it's just a number, and that is not my budget. That is my $4. So I'm going to go out and try to raise money right now. And I'm going to hit the ground running and do every angle I can, grants, everything we can to raise money. And like, I remember walking into back home in Missouri where we filmed, in my hometown where we filmed it. I remember walking into restaurants around the area because we were going to have a fundraiser. Well, here's a trick that I want to pass on to a lot of filmmakers who are like, how do I get the capital? How do I get started? And this might actually take what you like and leave the rest. But what I've done every time we've had to do it was, for a fundraiser, I would go to each like restaurants around that area or whatever. It didn't matter if they were a chain or not, because most places are franchise. And I'd be like, hey, we're going to have a fundraiser over at this bar in town for this movie. For this nonprofit film, do you have anything that you can donate from your business that we can raffle off? And about 8 out of 10 times, and look, I had a show Bible, I had stuff to show them, I had everything on me, I had done my homework, and so like I could show them everything or leave stuff with them, and I was walking to those places hungry, because I was literally surviving on a 1 pack of chicken McNuggets a day for $1 off of McDonald's. And I'm walking in going, hi, do you have any like gift cards at your restaurant for our movie? And Farrell, like, that's what it takes sometimes. And a lot of people don't want to make that sacrifice because they're too afraid. And they're too afraid. And I don't blame them, because I was afraid too, every single time. And like, it somehow works. If you keep doing it, it's like adding a pebble to the bucket. The more pebbles you add, the fuller that bucket's going to get. And so like, all you need is 1 pebble to get started. And yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. Go for it.
Oh no, I just wanted to wrap it up and say that what happened was we ended up getting, I'm talking from corporate McDonald's, we got $50 gift cards, $100 gift cards. We ended up using that technique, over $1,000, $1,100 in like free stuff from around town. Now that wouldn't happen in LA. You'd have a tough time, because we had some fundraisers out here and they were not as successful. You might find that since anyone can make a movie anywhere now, it will be easier in your hometown. It'll be easier in the smaller town, because when you take a movie out of here, out of this area, and put it anywhere else, it suddenly becomes, it's hard still, very hard, but it's a lot easier to sell them and get them excited about your movie. The town gets excited because, oh my God, you're making a movie. And it didn't matter that we were making a movie for no money. People were excited about the movie because the movie was a reflection of the town. It was about a real skating rink that had been torn down, that was no longer there after 50 years that I worked at. It was about real people who went there. It was about the town itself. And so they really wanted to be a part of it. And I don't know, I just think that like that kind of stuff, it takes that kind of sacrifice, maybe not to the level where you're hungry walking in asking for stuff for your fundraiser for your movie, but it takes that level of like, I will go hungry to make sure this fucker gets made. Like and that's the kind of drive I have. And I know that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. So, speaking of LA and the cynicism, I want to go back a little bit to your journey and your decision to move to LA, because this is something that I tell people now, and it's something I wasn't aware of when I moved there. If you want to be a filmmaker, don't move to LA.
Right. Nowadays, too.
Yeah, and I say that, not being facetious or anything at all. I mean, it's literally like a practical thing. LA is expensive. The cynicism is you could cut it with a knife. It's a lot more difficult to get people to take you seriously when you're starting out. There's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of traps to fall into. It's when you make a movie, it's better to go places that have starry eyes, that are a little, less cynical, a little bit more like, oh, you're making a movie, like it's glamorous to them, even if you're making a little $10,000 or $1,000 film.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to wrap up really quickly on that, bring up an interesting point, because you kind of reminded me of something just now when you brought that up. It was the community was so excited to be a part of it, and the most important part is they all learned how to make a movie when they started in pre-production. Most of our cast had never made a movie before. Most of the people we had on the crew, and some days we only had a 3-person crew, and it was me, the DP, and someone working sound. And like some days we had a bigger crew. It just depended on who could show up, and that's sort of like how we did it. But the community learned by the end. Everybody had learned what marks were. It was like a film school for everyone, and they got so jazzed. This is the best part, that a lot of them went out and started making their own stuff together. A group of people in that community who had not previously worked together suddenly made this and then branched off to do their own stuff. And a lot of them are going to film school now. And I'm not saying that's our movie that did that, but it really helped sort of solidify, I think, a lot, because our cast is a lot of younger high schoolers who are now colleges and stuff. But like a lot of them suddenly started going, oh, wow, like this guy used to make movies here. Now he came back and he's making another one about this town. And like, now I kind of understand that I can do it too. So in a way, I had become my own Kevin Smith without realizing it, by going back to my hometown to make a movie and get people involved in the community.
That's great. So tell me about the decision to move to LA, and the initial steps of moving there and getting there, and what the feeling was like, and try and take us back and give us a snapshot of that stuff.
Yeah, I'll keep that a little brief too, and I appreciate you asking me that, because
take all the time you need, man.
Oh, thank you. I just don't want to bore the viewers, man.
No. Awesome. We love this stuff.
I'm nervous, guys. I'm real nervous. No one ever asked me these questions. These are only questions I ask in my head. Why is LA so cynical? Why does everyone hate me? No, so the way it started was I was in Missouri. I'd been making movies since about 93, and it was about 1996 now. It's been 3 years, and I was, I guess, very impatient. And I had just turned 18, and I was kind of tired of making movies there, because I was like, I just want to go to Hollywood. I just want to go to Hollywood and make movies. Fuck everybody here. They're making fun of me. I have a small group of friends who are doing it, but other people, like, it just wasn't common. Like they, so the kids didn't understand it. High schools are, especially back then in the 90s. And so I sort of felt like I just need to get out of here, and I need to get to Los Angeles. And so I was working at the skating rink at the time, at the Jackson Skate Center. And I remember that weekend, the weekend before I decided to leave, I'm like, I'm going to save up everything I can for 2 weekends, every bit of money I got. So I did that, which wasn't a lot. And then in between those 2 weekends, I had saved rink money. I sold everything I had. I pawned my Super Nintendo. I pawned all my movies. I pawned all my CDs. And I was a DJ at the roller rink. I had a bunch of Columbia House CDs over the years. And then so I and other CDs from Walmart and CD singles, I'd sold all of those at the time. And I had nothing but the clothes on my back. And I think I had like $600 in my pocket. I was like, okay, here I go. And so then, without telling anyone, I think I told maybe 1 or 2 people. And then I sort of left in the middle of the night. And I snuck out of the house, my grandma's house, and I got the car, and I sat there at like 11:45 in the driveway at night going, am I going to do this? I have no idea where I'm going. I only looked at a road map once. I didn't even have a road map with me. I just knew how to get to Mississippi, where my mom lived, and then take the 10 freeway from there straight. to here. I was like, if I stay on the 10, I go right to LA. So that's easy enough for me. So I added on another 550 miles to my trip by doing that. But I remember leaving Missouri and pulling out of the driveway at my grandma's house and going down the road. And it was the hardest decision I ever, because I'm like 18, man. You know, I'm like 18 years old and I sold everything I had. And I'm like, am I fucking just a fool right now? Like, I should stay here and make more movies with my friends. What am I doing? I don't know anybody in California. I know nobody. I'm a complete outsider. And I have to leave all my friends and my grandma.
Yeah.
And it was hard and it was scary. And I fucking did it. I was like, I'm just going to go. And the further away I got, and the closer I got there, it was I started to feel a little like better about it because it was freeing. I was suddenly driving across the country, seeing states I'd never seen before, seeing vistas and views I'd never seen. I started thinking and dreaming because you have all that time. You have all that open road, you know. And back in the late 90s, there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't like Spotify or anything like that. So, pretty much at the mercy of the radio or whatever cassette tapes I had. And I just remember just driving the 2.5 days out to LA, and the money I had gotten from selling everything and setting up at the rink was dwindling on the trip. And I got out here finally in November of 1996. So 24 years ago, almost to the month. And I didn't know anyone, and I sort of saw a sign that said Hollywood. I was like, oh, I want to go that way. So I followed the 10 to the 101, and I kind of pulled off and ended up in this parking lot in, I guess, like the heart of Hollywood. And I'm just going to park somewhere, and then I'm just going to take the bus to James Cameron's office at Lightstorm because that's where I want to go. And so I had written down Lightstorm Entertainment's address on this little tiny Post-it note that I kept in my wallet for like a year. And I had pulled it out, and I parked my car, so I get my bearings, and I walked up to somebody in Hollywood, and I go, excuse me, do you know how I get to this address? And it was on Santa Monica Boulevard. And they're like, yeah, go ahead and take this bus. Just take it all the way there. It'll drop you right off. I'm like, okay. So I get on the bus, and I'm like, now, granted, I haven't called anyone yet. No one knows where I am. My family doesn't know. My friends don't know. They don't know I'm here. I'm going to call them as soon as I get a hotel for tonight. But the very first thing I need to do is go to James Cameron's office. And the reason I wanted to go to Jim Cameron's office was not only to talk to him about filmmaking, but I wanted to convince him at the time that I was the perfect Peter Parker I wanted to convince him to give me an audition to be Spider-Man. I was 19. Yeah, I was 19 and he was attached at the time. No, I was 18. He was attached at the time to the project, the last I heard. And
I remember that. I remember reading at some point later the treatment that he had written.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and Peter Parker Spider-Man was my all-time dream role. He's my all-time favorite superhero. So as you know, yeah. And I think this is probably going to set up a good segue into the next thing we were talking about before the show. So I get there, and I'm wearing, for the viewers at home, a button-down blue jean denim shirt. For anyone who remembers that phase of the '90s, and then denim jeans and a Spider-Man tie. I still have that tie. And I get off the bus and I look up, and there's Jim Cameron's Lightstorm logo that I've seen 1,000 times in front of True Lies. And I'm like freaking out. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm here. Oh my God. What do I do? How do I do this? I don't know how I do this. And that's usually how my plans start, is I don't know how they're going to work. And I just jump into the fire. Because I got somewhat of a plan. I just sort of go with it. And I went into there. I walked in, and there was it was an very empty lobby. It was about a 3-story building in Santa Monica, right off Santa Monica Boulevard. It's gray. And there was a lone security guard there and an elevator, because Lightstorm was the only thing in the building at that time. And I get to the security guard, and I'm like, hi. And he's like, hi, can I help you? And I'm like, yes, hi, I'm Nick Murphy, and I'm an actor, director from Missouri, and I just got here today. Can I see James Cameron, please?
And I could totally picture you doing that. It's like textbook
Right?
Nick Murphy.
It's like textbook Nick Murphy. This is so. What would Nick Murphy do? Fucking something ballsy and dumb as hell. Doesn't know it's gonna work.
That's kind of the gumption you need to survive in that town. Seriously.
Yeah. You know, I thank you. But I remember being scared shitless. I didn't have any gumption then.
But you had the instinct and the. Not everybody. I think some people, they take that for granted. I mean, it comes natural to them, but breeds like us, there's just a natural instinct to present ourselves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, so I think you had that. So what ended up happening? What did the security guard? Did he look at you funny?
Yeah, that's so good. He said, okay, sign here. So I signed the sign-in check. I said it was very convincing. Or either he was like, Jim is going to destroy this kid. I'm just going to watch it happen. I don't care. I see 1,000 of these kids every day. He's like, so 18-year-old me gets in the elevator and I'm sweating bullets with this guy. And I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. And then he puts in the key and we go up to the second floor and I ding and get out. I walk in and I'm standing sat down in the lobby of the Lights Room Entertainment. And there's a receptionist there at the front desk. And he goes, he's on the phone. He goes, hello, can I help you? And I'm like, oh, yeah, just 1 second. When you're off the phone. He goes, oh, yeah, okay. And he goes, yeah, how can I help you? And I'm like, hi, yes, I'm Nick Murphy. I decided to try the same thing. I was like, if it worked once, maybe it'll work with this guy, right? And I'm like, hi, yes, I'm Nick Murphy, and I'm an actor, director from Missouri, and I just got here today, and I was hoping I could speak to Jim Cameron for like 5 minutes, maybe tomorrow or whenever. I'm 18. I don't know about schedules, or maybe Jim's busy. I don't think about any of this stuff, And he's like, his mouth drops. Beryl. I remember the look on his face. I can see it now. Literally, his jaw hits the floor. He's like, I'm sorry, what? And I'm like, yeah. So I decided to explain it again, except a little slower, because maybe I'm talking too fast because I'm so nervous. So I explain again. I go, hi. I explain again. And he goes, how did you get up here? And I'm like, talked to the security guard. I felt so bad after I left. Now thinking about it now, I hope that guy was okay. But I was like, yeah, I talked to the security guard and like he let me up. I just drove here from Missouri. I saw all my stuff. I'm a huge Jim Cameron fan. I've seen True Lies like 40 times and all Terminator movies. And I know he's attached to Spider-Man. And I wanted to talk to him about auditioning for Peter Parker. And this guy just looks at me like, oh my God, this kid, right? And so he's like, well, Jim isn't here. I'm like, where is he? And he's like, he's in Mexico shooting Titanic. I'm like, why? When's he going to be back? Is he going to be back anytime soon? And the guy's like, no, he's going to be down there a while. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, thank you. And he's like, when did you get here? Like today. He's like, and where'd you come from? Missouri. I make movies. And suddenly he started to put two and two together. And luckily, I think I could see his face kind of like, become more kind, and he realized this wasn't a joke, and I was very genuine in it, and I guess, and he took pity on me, and he gave me a Hollywood reporter from the front desk, and he pointed to the stuff in the back of stuff that's in production. He said, you need a headshot and a resume, and you need to send this stuff off to production companies that are here in the back. And I'm like, oh, what's a headshot? And there you go. And so eventually he gave me that, and I walked out of Jim Cameron's office defeated. But looking back on it now, how cool of a story is that? There was no defeat there at all.
That's definitely an all-timer, man. Yeah, like I got to LA when I was 21, and I had, I was a little bit more, I guess, up on kind of, I mean, I was a little bit more, I've been watching DVDs and commentaries and, reading magazines, and I kind of got what the thing was, but I was still pretty naive. And
Mm-hmm.
I called, let's see. So it was me and my roommate. We had written this script. It was just a bad horror script. And we'd opened the phone book and looked at the back of the Fight Club DVD and saw the names, or no, it was a little packet inside, saw the names of the people who produced it. And we called Fox and we just asked to speak to these people. Seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we actually
That's
got through.
awesome.
We got
yes.
we got through to, I think it was Kevin McCormick's office.
Sweet.
And I didn't think I was going to get through, so I didn't freeze, but words spilled out, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but something about a horror script, and it was his assistant, and assistant was pretty interested. She's like, "Hey, pitch it. Like, what is it?" And I pitched it, and he seemed more appreciative of the fact that I had the balls to pitch than the actual story, but
right,
it gave me a little bit of confidence to keep doing it. And I didn't even realize it at the time that was just, people just generally didn't do that.
Right.
And you need that a little. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, you need that sort of that naivete is what kind of keeps you sane in a way.
Well, I hope more. I agree with you, and I hope more filmmakers and artists and writers and everyone out there listening to this now who plays into that a little more. Just go ask. There is the worst thing they're ever going to tell you is no. Okay.
Right.
But like, that is the absolute worst thing. Just be cool about it. Like, nowadays it's a lot different. The industry is completely changing. Yeah. And we could talk about that forever. But, like that kind of naivete, I still used that as I got older. I still use that. I'm just going to do this and get an answer. And then if you say no, I'll go somewhere else. And I kept doing that. Because in film school, I remember halfway through, really briefly, I wasn't going to be able to afford to keep going. And so I started driving around to studios pre 9/11. And I started driving around to studios, and I was able to drive onto the lot or walk onto the lot because I was like, oh, hey, security guard. I'm by this time I was a pro at it, I was like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm here to see Joel Silver, blah, 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 blah. And I'm from the film school, and I'm gonna try to get like people to my plan was to go to studio lots and production companies, get someone to pay the rest of like the last $13,000 on my on the LA Film School's very cheap tuition at that time. And that way I could stay in school. And then when I graduated in like 4 or 5 months, I would come work off that money for them. We could sign it all off. We could draft the contracts. But I would come work off that $13,000, and they would basically be funding the rest of my money because I didn't have anywhere else to get it. And so I just tapped into that same, I guess, textbook shit, and ended up going to different offices. I remember I ended up at Joel Silver's on the Warner Brothers lot. He wasn't there, so they directed me. I pitched my thing to them, what I was doing to get more money to come work. They're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Just go over to this office and talk to this person. And I did. And like, you know how it is. You got to get past the receptionist. Well, the receptionist didn't want to tell him, and I didn't want to tell her to tell him because she was going to not get the pitch right because she wanted to get me out of there. And so I just wanted a chance to be heard first before getting thrown out. And so I kind of stood my ground a bit. And I was like, no, I was sent over here from Joel Silver's office to talk to him. So I'm going to talk. I forget his name is Kevin. It was somebody. And then so this guy comes out of his office, his producer, who works for Silver, and he's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hey, man, I'm Nick Murphy, and I'm here, and I'm going to go to film school. I'm in film school now. I go to Los Angeles Film School in Hollywood, and I was only able to pay this much of my tuition, and we have the rest left, and I don't have anywhere else to go. So I was hoping maybe we could work something out here at this company. You guys could pay it, and I'll come work for you, because $13,000 is a drop in the bucket in a day for a production company in Hollywood. And so Like that guy was like, what are you talking about? And then he was like, no. And he wouldn't let me finish. And I kept trying to tell him that pitch, right? Kept trying to tell him that. And then like, he was like trying to be like, get out here. I was like, no, listen to me right now. Joel Silver sent me over here, and this is what's up. I am in film school, and I need you guys to sponsor me so I could try and like get some funding here, and then I'll come work for you. And that is what I'm trying to tell you. And when I said, no, listen to me right now, boy, he fucking stopped. That dude, that producer of Hollywood stopped in his tracks. That dude, he was like, whoa. He was like, hey, let's walk outside and talk. And so we did. And then he was like, Nick, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. He's like, but it's awesome. I wish I could help you, man. We can't. I'm so sorry, but this is so cool. I really hope that that works out for you. And that was kind of like the way it went. And then it ultimately ended up working out, as you know.
Yeah.
But it was still kind of that same sort of like, I'm here and I have one shot at this.
Right. And another way that you kind of, made your way through Hollywood in a bit of a living was as an extra. And I wanted to segue into something that I didn't know that we had previously talked about before we started recording was, so I was, relating a story about, I got to Hollywood and, I was walking on Hollywood Boulevard one day and a guy, he said, hey, do you want to be an extra in a movie? And I said, sure. What is it? Oh, it's Spider-Man. It was the first Spider-Man movie. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds cool. So they bus us out to Downey, which was outside of Los Angeles. And, in a yellow school bus, a bunch of us. And we get there and it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I mean, they had commandeered this vacant lot and set up multiple shooting sets of multiple different camera units that were going to shoot segments of certain scenes. And one of the main set was the Macy Gray concert in Times Square. I went through the whole thing and, they pull you down from these bleachers and say, okay, you guys are going to be over here. You're going to be walking to this direction. And they'd have an assistant say, well, here's what you're going to be going to a music store, or you're going to be going to a cafe, just to put it in your head. And I got to see how they commandeer extras. And I got to see Spider-Man flipping and
yeah, right.
The fire in the building.
Back before he was CG'd.
Back before he was CG and the pieces from the hotel falling and the stunts and stuff. And I left and I had no idea that Nick Murphy was actually there.
Yes, sir, I was, man. I was doing background work. That was the very first kind of job I got into when I was out here. I started doing audience work. I remember back in the day, I ended up signing with a really kind of crappy background acting agency because there's so many that tried to take advantage of you back then. Nowadays, it can be pretty legit, but I didn't know about central casting. I didn't know about any of that stuff because no one ever told me. I didn't research it. I just sort of figured things out as I went and adapted as necessary. I did background work for about 4 years or so. From like 96 to about 2000, right before I went to film school, I did extra work. I was on Buffy and X-Files and Freaks and Geeks and shit. You can see me in a lot of these episodes. I would do PA work too. And so one of the background jobs I got, because I would beg my calling service for an opportunity to work on it, was Spider-Man with Sam Raimi, because I'm a huge, huge Sam Raimi fan. And a huge, as you know, Spider-Man fan, obviously. And so I showed up and like, it was that same set that you were there. And I think that's so fucking cool because like we were there, dude. And then we ended up at the same film school together. We may have ran past each other in the middle of the Green Goblin pumpkin bombing the hell out of New York. Yeah. Like we may have like crossed each other and didn't even know it. We may have said, hey, in the background holding area,
right? Yeah.
And I think that's so cool how life works that way, know?
Yeah. And then, we met at film school and it was an interesting class. I mean, I think it was like 40 people and it was a new school at the time and they were still working the kinks out. And there were certain issues that some of the students have and some of us banded together and wrote a letter and tried to get them to change things. And, but
I remember that.
Yeah. It was the school, for people who don't know, it's like a technical college. They kind of cram 2 years of curriculum into like 1 year. Sometimes it felt like 4 years of curriculum in 1 year.
It really did.
And they had sound stages and editing stations and sound mixing, and they had a big THX theater that you could show your films in. It was a really class act. I mean, in terms of just scale and the amount of things you could rent cameras, and it was amazing. Now, one thing that I did get out of it that I don't think that a lot of people know about is the cameras and the renting and the cameras and stuff is all good, and the editing and is all good, but it's the friendships and the contacts and the relationships that you have with people that is probably the most valuable thing.
Absolutely. 100%. Because I'm still friends with a lot of people from our class. Like, I'll still hang out with them, and I remember even in the editing process of All Night Skate, like Peter Steer and Alex and Sean Roldan were involved in notes and stuff like that. So, it's one of those things where you still kind of circle back. You find you don't talk to those people for a while, and we all kind of go off and do our own thing, and then we always circle back around, and it's always warm smiles because we went through it together. We went through that whole process where we were changing our craft at light speed.
Yeah, and one interesting thing that happened was, so this was literally right before September 11th. I remember, I think it was like the third day of my first class, September. So basically I was sleeping on the floor of, do you remember Mark
Martinez? Yes.
Yeah, I was sleeping on the floor of his recording studio.
Oh, wow.
Across the street in that high-rise building.
Wow.
I was sleeping on the floor and going to school. And then the third day of film school, he wakes me up early, panicked. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And he's like, you got to come see this. And I go and look at the TV, and the Twin Towers are on fire. And I'm like, what is happening? And we're actually in a very tall building. And we don't know what's going on at this point because, information was coming in slowly, but no one really knew. So we're like, do we need to get the hell out of here? Because we're also in a big city. Are they bombing cities or what's happening? Turned out to be not the case, thank God. It was a terrible situation, but I remember going to school. I don't know if it was that day or the next day, but I just remember everybody was in shock, obviously. And that was like the beginning of film school.
Yes. And what's crazy is I'd been there a month before. I was working the front desk to, remember that thing where I said, hey, I'll work off my hours? I got that idea from working the front desk at the film school. They allowed me to work there for a month, Monday through Friday at the front desk, and that would pay off part of my tuition. So that's what I did. And so I got to know everybody, got to know the layout of the school like a month before you guys came along. Like, I knew in August of 01 that I was going to be in the September of 01 class.
Right.
I think I may have even met you at the front when you were coming in to sign in. I was sitting there.
Okay. I think I remember that.
Yeah. So, because I was basically doing anything I could to stay in the game, because I didn't want to get kicked out because I'd made it this far into film school, and it was such a gamble because I didn't have $23,000. And so, but I remember sitting there and being there for a month and getting to know people, and that's made it really hard on September 11th because like we had just started to, as young filmmakers, really start to bond, and just I remember seeing the heartbreak and the despair and the frustration and the absolute just anger on people's faces who had to leave class, who had friends in New York and they couldn't get a hold of them. They couldn't get a hold of family. They couldn't get a hold of anyone. And they were just, I got to go home. I can't be here. And eventually I remember that day they shut down school. Like, we all got sent home early.
Yeah.
And it was just, I had those same thoughts you had when I was driving into school that morning. Is this going to be happening in every city? Turns out that was originally the plan. We were on the list, but it got shut down early after the Pentagon failure.
Right.
The heroic sacrifices from those people. And the thing I remember a lot about it was afterwards, we had that thing where we all went into the theater a few days later, and we all talked about our feelings as a class.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was such a healing moment for us at the time. And I'm really grateful that the school was able to allow us to do that. And that was, I think, Joe Byron's idea. And I love Joe, and he's still there, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, I see stuff from him sometimes, and yeah, you're right. I mean, it was very emotionally a lot of emotional turmoil, and it was kind of, I don't know, it was strange. I mean, the effects of it weren't felt immediately. I think a lot of it was kind of just shell shock.
Yeah.
And then later on, I think psychologically some things may have come out and may have made things a little bit more difficult for people. I want to get into so after film school, like kind of take us a little bit through what your goals and your plans were. Were you going to make a film? Were you, what were you doing after school, after film school?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I got to think back to that now. I don't think I remember. I was already working full time during film school at Jerry's Famous Deli, so I could afford to pay rent and bills and my thesis and pre-thesis film budgets. So I had gotten a job waiting tables at Jerry's Deli in Westwood near UCLA at film school, the graveyard shift, like 9 to like midnight or 2, or sometimes midnight to 8 in the morning. And because it was a 24-hour diner that's no longer there.
Yeah.
And luckily I'd gotten that job. I was looking for an overnight job because I needed one. I couldn't be like the other kids in film school. Some of them were lucky enough to have it paid for. That was not me. And so I was working overnights and going to school full time. And so sometimes I would be like you. I would sleep in the editing bay, or I would find a way to get there and like just stay there, because halfway through, shortly when our class began, my car engine died, and so I didn't have a car anymore. And I had to take the bus everywhere. And that added on 2.5 to 3 hours of commute time, no matter where I went. So I was living in Van Nuys, I was working in the Valley or at Westwood, and I was going to school in Hollywood. So that became problematic. After film school was over, I continued to work at Jerry's, and I got this idea to make like a Tomb Raider short music video. I was like, a music video is easy because I can cut to like the band playing the song I want to use. And then I can like cut to like cool shots, and I just have to like get those shots or get those select small scenes. And those are easier to do than a whole movie. And so I was talking to my friend Valerie at the time, and she was a huge Tomb Raider fan as well. And I was like, I told her about this, and she was like, that's so awesome. What if we made a short film? I'm like, you know what? Why not? I made Mortal Kombat in '95 for high school. When I was 17, I was Johnny Cage. My grandma made the costumes for Scorpion and Sub-Zero. This is cool. I can do another fan film. It's been a while. I just got out of film school. I know what I'm doing now. I went to film school. And so we decided to start this 2.5-year journey, 3-year journey, to make this Tomb Raider fan film that started off literally just as a crew of 3 people and just grew to be this huge thing. And so that's what I was working on after film school for several years, besides other short films. Was Tomb Raider became a big part of my life. And what was cool is, hello?
Yeah, sorry, I'm making some noise back here, so I got to mute this thing.
Copy.
Keep going. You're good.
What was cool was, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so 20 years later, after this film comes out and does pretty good, we did get recognized in a coffee table book from the amazing Megan Marie, who wrote this 330-page, 20-year history, official, like from the game company Crystal Dynamics and IDOS, history of Lara Croft. And within this book is pages and pages and pages of how Lara Croft got started, and all the way through fan drawings and fan cosplays, and then of course fan films, and our movie's in there. Wow. Tears of the Dragon is now 20 years later, like, I guess technically canon adjacent to that, and so it was a challenging film because it was just so hard to make for like $2,000 or $3,000. We made this huge action piece, and we had real explosions, and all the footage you see at the beginning is me renting a helicopter in LA for $300. And like, do you know those helicopters that you see fly that like you can rent a helicopter and go, oh, fly around Los Angeles for a romantic, you know, thing. I was like, I don't want to fly around Los Angeles for a romantic thing. I want to fly around Los Angeles for Michael Bay shots of the city at sunset. That's my footage. And so I scraped together like $330 and got an hour helicopter ride. And like he kicked open the side door and strapped me in a harness. And I had my little Sony camera that I'm looking at right now. And my mini DV camera, I just filmed a bunch of footage. It was at the wrong time because like 2 years later, HD became a really big thing, and then like suddenly that footage I had wasn't like as good looking because it was like 480p.
Yeah, just we were. That's another thing to note. In film school, we were right at the cusp of HD taking over. I remember the camera, the Canon XLR, the Canon XL, or whatever it was called, the Canon XLs were standard definition. I do remember seeing the first high definition short. A guy, and I don't remember what class he was in, but he showed it at the theater at film school, and it was an HD. And I remember going, "This is a game changer," because in terms of just being able to make a short, people need to understand. People who are used to making films and making shorts on their iPhone and things like that in 4K and HD, and it looks amazing. We didn't have that back then. Right. Our films looked like dog shit. They really did. I mean,
you remember David Daskell? Was that his name? Who called our films dog shit day one in film school class? He was like, "You're all dog shit. I don't care what kind of movies you made when you came here. You're all dog shit. You don't know anything."
He was great.
I loved him, and
but he was underneath. He was a sweetheart, man. He
was No, David Garcia. David Garcia.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace. I love him.
Oh, okay. So we were right on the cusp of HD, and I remember the transition by seeing this guy short, and I can't remember what it was about, but it was an HD, and it was color corrected, and it looked great, and I was like, man, this is changing. And then after film school, there was the further refine, and then there was I have a video coming out that I did. I made it a few weeks ago, but it'll be released in a couple of weeks on my channel. It's about digital versus film, and talking about digital cinematography and the quality, which is great, but it wasn't always like that. I remember going to see Attack of the Clones, the Star Wars movie, at the Chinese theater a couple of years, I guess it was a year later, and it was the first big digital movie that I remember. There were a couple of smaller digital movies that got made. I think one was like Session 9, shot in HD. And then Lucas's film, the second Star Wars, was probably the first big
on the Sony FD cameras, right?
Yeah. Right. And it looked good. I mean, it didn't look terrible or bad or anything, but you could tell it was early days.
Yes. And well, we actually use that same camera because the film school had them. So like, I was like, if Lucas is shooting on it, I'm shooting on it. And so, we used it for a romantic comedy. It was the wrong thing. It was just like, oh, this is a love story. This is not what I need to shoot a HD movie on, but I did because I wanted to shoot a love story for my thesis, if you remember. And then I shot like a pre-thesis about two guys who rob an ice skating rink. And so it was sort of like, I want to show I can do the quirky, kind of fun dialogue-y, action-y stuff and this. And then like I got out, I remember I was waiting tables at Jerry's Deli. And one of the cool things about waiting tables is you got to meet a lot of, it was Westwood, a lot of movie premieres, a lot of agents. I met a lot of agents. I remember one agent ICM, fuck this fucker. If you're listening, Chris Andrews, go fuck yourself. You're a piece of shit. Essentially like Chris Andrews, he was really cool at first, and then he was like, "Oh man, you just graduated film school?" I was like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Let me see some of your movies." I was like, "Sure, Chris Andrews, nice to him." I figured maybe if he didn't like them, he would pass them on to somebody else. No, he just didn't like them. I remember him telling me on the phone, "Never make a movie again." He was just like, "These movies are not what I thought. They were so bad," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, can't you see past the imperfections and see a story?" Because and that was sort of always a struggle, is like getting people to take the movie seriously. And it wasn't me. What I realized all these years later is it wasn't my fault. It was, I saw the movie as a movie regardless of what it was shot on.
Right.
They saw the movie as, oh, it's a home movie because it's not what I see it at ICM every day. This is not like a slick looking Hollywood budget stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
and
yeah, that's,
so,
like I was saying, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
like it relates to what I was saying back then. The movies, you know, the formats, if you were an independent filmmaker, film was very expensive to shoot on. So if you didn't have the money, you had to shoot on standard definition. And those movies had a stigma around them, because even when you go to Blockbuster back then, because I worked at Blockbuster, I remember this, some of those, you know, trashy B movies were shot on standard definition video.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell, and there was a big stigma around that. So the formats had not been worked out. If you wanted to be a filmmaker, you had no money, you had no choice but to shoot digitally. And people would look at it and go, "Oh, this looks terrible. It's obviously a bad movie because of the format it was shot on."
Correct.
That doesn't happen as much today because the cameras are much better, and people, especially agents, are able to look past the you know, whatever maybe little imperfections in production, but it allows them to take it more seriously. And I don't think we had that back then.
Absolutely. And well, that brings up a great point. I kind of wanted to touch on this. I don't know how much of this you're going to edit, and I hope you edit a lot of it, because we've gone over an hour already. But I don't know how long your show goes for.
No, it's as long as we want to go.
Oh, fantastic! Well, then I would like to bring this up, because this has sort of been what I've been noticing lately, and I think Hollywood needs a couple things. Number one, we need to take care of our own, and we're not. Especially in COVID-19, the UPMs, people who are not COVID compliant officers or trained in any way, are now in charge of our health and safety. And I think that is unacceptable and irresponsible, because a UPM already has so much on their plate to try to make a movie the right way, regardless of making a movie in a pandemic. Number two, we need to protect our own with hours, 12 on, 12 off. I fully believe that. There are a lot of people who are overworked. The problem is these crew members start getting these huge paychecks. Man, they love it. And so, but the problem is like their way of life starts matching those paychecks. So the only way they can keep that going is working a lot. And you see all these people getting in car accidents all the time. KJ Apa on Riverdale, all this other stuff. You know, we really need to start a systematic change to make movies where we're not killing ourselves trying to make them.
Right.
I really feel like we can do this where at the end of the day, we're not completely mentally exhausted like you had talked about. I honestly feel like a systematic change has to start, and it should have started when everything was shut down, because when is that opportunity ever going to come again? But instead, they only tried to get things to continue the way that it was before. And so that is the crux of this whole problem with Hollywood. Hollywood is still operating on their old gatekeepery ways before. And they're telling all these filmmakers now, hey, man, if you motherfuckers go out and shoot a movie, you can take it to the film festivals, and we're going to discover it for you, and then we're going to put you out there. The lie in that is that almost never happens. Most of the filmmakers at Sundance who are discovered, those filmmakers have done the Sundance Labs the year before. Sundance has been grooming them to put their film in Sundance. And then if your movie is under $500,000, and I can tell you that every movie I've ever made has been well under 20, you know, it's not considered a movie. It cannot win the audience award. It cannot win these other awards. It goes into a special side festival for the $500,000 and under. And I guess that's okay, but like, aren't you supposed to be independent film, Sundance? Aren't you supposed to be about When I Saw You and Kevin Smith and Tarantino and Rodriguez and Allison Anders and all these amazing filmmakers were coming to you in the early 90s? Yeah. What happened with that? Steven Soderbergh? Like these guys weren't making that stuff. They were making stuff way under then. What about, like, would El Mariachi get put into the side festival today? Is that, you know?
No, I that's, there's actually a book about this. The whole the festival thing, specifically Sundance, and it goes into the history of Sundance and the way it was started and why it was started. And I can tell you that initially Sundance was a friend of the filmmaker in terms of indie filmmakers. Like in the beginning, it was much more indie friendly, and then it kind of became this more commercial behemoth. And
yes, exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And it's here's the thing. Like, if you're making films, if you're in a position where you're actually getting money and making stuff, maybe not big budget stuff, and you're kind of in that lower tier section, you're maybe making genre films, and you happen to get into a festival, it can help elevate your movie a little bit higher. But there is a huge subsection of filmmakers that they just ignore. They don't. Most invites to film festivals are they're friends of friends, or they. There's very few films that play a film festival that are just discoveries. Like, hey,
exactly.
It's and that's I don't know. I mean, it's I think that there used to be a little bit more empathy towards the little guys, and a lot of films aren't worthy of being in a festival. A lot of them need work. That's fine, but there are a lot of films that are actually pretty damn good. But they just didn't have the money. They didn't have the cast maybe necessarily, but there's something there. True. And I think if you're a film fan, you can kind of see past that. And I think a lot of film festivals today, it's really just one big commercial outfit. I mean, it really is.
It really is. And I also speak from experience. There is one film festival that is still very much about the little guy, and that's the San Diego Comic-Con Film Festival. And I speak from experience on that because I was fortunate enough from 2016 and recently last year, 2019, to be one of the judges of the film festival. So cool. I got to watch all these. That was amazing. I got to watch all these different short films, features. Like anytime we had about 150 to 200 movies to go through both times as judges. And the first time I judged it, one of the other judges was Eric Jacobus, who's a good friend of mine who worked on Tomb Raider: Tears of the Dragon with me. He's a filmmaker in San Francisco. He's also a martial artist, a stuntman, and actor, and works in the video game world nowadays. But he was there too. We were judging it together with Matt. What's his last name? Atchie from Rotten Tomatoes, the guy who runs Rotten Tomatoes, Matt. So Matt and Eric and I were the judges that year, and I got to watch all of these amazing films I never would have seen before from filmmakers from all around the world. I'm talking budgets of $5. I'm talking budgets of much higher than that. Everything in between, all kinds of genres, usually geek genre-related films. And there were some beautiful films that I saw the last two times I judged, and I was so thankful for it because they inspired me. And I tended to give films a higher rating that may have had a lower budget, but were stronger in other areas. Because I was able, having made movies my whole life on VHS and stuff where people told me my movies weren't good enough, I was able to look past what they were trying, and I could see what they were trying to do. I could see what they were trying to execute just by watching their film. And I can tell you that everyone who ever won those films, it was great for rewards. And all my other filmmaker friends who've won a lot of festivals, I said, has anything come from all the laurels you've gotten? And they're like, no, I haven't gotten an agent from it. And so that's a problem because we need to be more transparent about our film festivals, and we need to make them actually worthy of, because you can spend so much money trying to get your film festival there, and then you have to market it, and you have to fly there and all that other shit, that you should be making another movie. You know what I mean? With the money you spend on film festivals, you should be out there prepping your next film if you're going to do that, right?
Yeah, so the fees alone, it can be financially prohibitive for people to, especially when you have no money to make the movie. You don't have a budget for festivals.
Right. And that's what a lot of people don't realize about the independent filmmaker is it's that plight to get your thing seen. And in today's world where everybody can make a movie, anybody can make a movie. So now that's another problem that I want to address. I think Hollywood needs to pay attention to. They tried to do it, but they tried to do it in their own greedy capitalistic way, which is fine. They were going at it in terms of how many followers do you have, which is good because if they're going to invest in it, they need to be able to go to their investors and say, oh, this person has this many followers, or this movie got this many views, or whatever. And they were going off of quantity, not quality, because there's so much stuff. They're not going to have anyone who sits there and combs the internet looking for stuff. If these studios are really filmmaker friendly, you need to get out of the whole money game and set aside, I don't know, $50, $100 million out of your yearly fiscal budget and say, this is how we're going to find new talent. We're going to take this, we're going to build a new thing in our studio, and all these people are going to comb the internet, and we're going to start finding these filmmakers of all ages, of all diversities, of all stories from around the world. Because being a judge myself, I got to see a lot of them, and there were so many voices. And not only are we going to do that, but we're going to give them an opportunity within our studio to put them on our app. Hey, you want to check these new up-and-coming fresh voices? Here they are. Why aren't we doing that? Why? Why aren't we kicking the door down and going, hey, it's 2020 now and everyone's making a movie. Let's really go out there, and why aren't they coming to us? My whole life out here, the best piece of advice I ever gotten was Hollywood comes to you. Oh, no, wait, you don't go to them.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, why don't they come to us anyway? Why are they looking for us? You know, because, gosh, all the films I saw, I'm like, how are these people not signed? How are these people not? I have so many filmmaker friends who are so good at what they do. And it's just like they can't quite crack it. They can't quite, like, it doesn't matter what level they're at. They're hitting the wall. They're hitting the wall. They're hitting the wall. And they're hitting the ceiling. And that ceiling has been placed there by Hollywood. And they're getting better at it, but they really need to cultivate and try to get together some kind of program that's going to inspire, that's going to encourage. And it may not work for everybody. Like, there's no guarantee your movie could get in that program because it's all hypothetical. But I'm just saying that, like, something to not keep the gate closed so tight, because that's why so many people leave. That's why so many people give up. Because what Hollywood likes to perpetuate is you're not good enough until we tell you you're good enough.
Yeah, and look, here's the deal, man. I mean, Hollywood, they have tons of movies that are just bad and tons of TV shows that are just bad. So it's not a matter of it's almost a weird thing. It's a conundrum. It's like they're keeping out a lot of voices because of quality, but most of the stuff that they make is not that great. I mean, you have some good stuff. You know, if you go on Netflix, you know, and you just browse, yeah, you see some good movies here and there, but there's really not a lot. There's a lot of crap too. So I don't necessarily sometimes buy that argument. I think that a lot of it really does come down to relationships, you know, whether the person is talented or not, you know, and some people they're not able to cultivate these relationships because, you know, Hollywood is a very insulated place. Sometimes you really do sometimes have to I moved to Austin, Texas, and it wasn't until I moved to Austin that I started to gain traction because it was a different environment. It was a lot more inviting. There are people here who love movies. They're much more interested in the art form of cinema than they are making deals. I think Hollywood is too deal focused. Yeah. So I think that the issue is Hollywood does not have a very big mentorship mentality.
They don't. Not anymore. They used to, but they don't anymore.
Yeah, because there was apprenticeship programs.
Well, I think that was in the 70s whenever those filmmakers kicked the door down, like Hopper and all those guys, you know. And I think they really started to go, oh, wow, these maverick filmmakers out there, Scorsese and all these dudes are just kicking, let's like mentor them and then find other people like them. And now, and, you know, and Sundance was kind of that way too, when they were more about independent film. But now, again, they're just about selling the thing. They're basically like the American film market. And that's Slam Dance as well. And that's but the smaller one, like San Diego is still very artist friendly. And there are, I'm sure, other great festivals out there that are artist friendly. But it's like that, you hit that thing. Okay, I won this award. Well, then now what? Do I give it to my friend who knows an agent somewhere? Is that agent going to sign me and not do anything with me? Like, I have friends in this business who are making hit shows, who are working on hit shows, who are like not happy because they want to work on their own stuff. And so what I realize is, like, you got these people who are just grinding on something else, and then it becomes a job. And I think a lot of the people that what they don't realize is like filmmaking definitely becomes a job. And then you have a very vocal group of people like, I would do that job immediately. Like, why? If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. And so,
Yeah, let me just jump in because I was going to say that. So they just had this recent announcement from Disney about their entire, slate for the year and stuff.
oh yeah,
And it was literally 99% remakes, sequels, and adaptations and things. I mean, it was very little of it was actually original. And
right.
the example that I give is that a lot of these, a lot of great filmmakers who make great movies, they get sucked into the machine, meaning
Mm-hmm.
they can make a great movie, but that only leads to, hey, do you want to make the next Marvel film?
Right. Which I'm all for it. Yes,
Yeah, no,
please.
no, yeah, and
Sign
don't
me
don't
up.
don't think that I'm against Marvel. I like Marvel stuff, but to me that's Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, sequels and remakes are pretty much the game in town at this point.
They really
Um,
are. They really
so
are.
there used to be a lot more diversity in Hollywood filmmaking and theatrical filmmaking. There used to be a wide variety of different things.
A lot.
The films that we grew up on that we loved, and today it's an assembly line of fast food. And that's another problem is that even if you become successful, a lot of filmmakers they even aspire to it. It's like, okay, I'm going to make my little movie and then Marvel's going to hire me and then I'll just make
Right.
Avengers movies for the rest of my life, which
Right.
is, if you want to do that, great. But I think a lot of people, like you said, they don't anticipate how miserable they might be doing the same things over and over again.
Well, exactly. It's like, yes, you're going to play with all this cool technology because like Disney is on the forefront with that new stage crate thing that they're doing with the volumes
Yeah.
for Mando.
Hmm.
I think it's phenomenally cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is a game changer. And so I think that the big blockbusters need to be that so we can come up with that cool tech that will change the game for everybody around. But yeah, everything is because I'm going to tell you another piece of advice that someone told me that I thought was really good. When I was interning at Principal Young at a talent agency, we got to interview the two dudes at the top and one of the dudes, for an hour at the end of our internship. And oh yeah, that's where I ended up after film school. I was interning there for a little while. While I was making movies and stuff. So then I asked one of them, why does Hollywood say no to one thing? A bunch of people say no, and then that movie becomes successful anyway. When it was like an original idea that everyone passed on. And he said, that's a great question. I'm going to tell you why. Because everybody in Hollywood is afraid of failure. Because if that movie succeeds, and they passed on it, that person's fired. If that movie does exceptionally well and they said yes, then someone else who's passed on it is also fired. Like, it's just like a thing where if it doesn't do well, then they're fired, is what I meant to say. So it's sort of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think what it is like what Hollywood needs to realize is we're all just people, man. These labels that you're giving us, executive producer, and I have my North Face jacket, and I'm getting real comfortable by the monitor, and I'm going to drive my SUV home, and I'm going to put my feet up. Yeah, that's great, but you get too comfortable. These people get too comfortable. They lose sight. They start to get out of touch with reality. They start to get out of touch with what the people want to see. Because at the end of the day, what Hollywood needs to ultimately know, and I think they do, and I think they really found out about it this year, and it really kind of shook them up. The consumer is the one who is paying your bills. The audience, the people who pay for your stuff, the people who put down their hard-earned $5, $20, $25, those are the people you need to talk to, not talk down to. You need to realize that, like, I just sort of feel there's a huge disconnect, and it is a machine. And it's sad. It's sad because I remember being inspired by this machine. This is what gave me my dream, man.
Right.
How do we forget? How do those people who go to these award shows forget where they fucking came from? And I'll tell you why, because you got to sacrifice a part of yourself and you fall into the machine and then you reason it. You reason it out in your head and you say, this is fine. just like that meme, right? This is fine. I guess this is what I need to do. As long as I can get that extra $10,000 for doing the same, it just becomes this thing. Your lifestyle starts to support its lifestyle, and then you become more inclusive. And I think what Hollywood does is it becomes inclusive because it's afraid of other people getting in and too many people getting in and messing it up. So they get really inclusive. They're almost like Facebook when they first started. Oh, you can join us, but only if you know somebody and they recommend you.
Well, originally Facebook was supposed to be like this Harvard exclusive social media thing.
And that's sort of how that's sort of how Hollywood feels, like a Harvard exclusive social media thing sometimes.
Yeah.
You know.
So I wanna talk a little bit about the movie that you I think you're finishing up now, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Actually, so I did talk a little bit about it throughout this, and amazing podcast. Thank you for having me on, by the way, for all this.
Oh, thanks for being on.
I mean, I hope I didn't come across too jaded or angry.
No. It's good it's good to.
I'm just passionate about it. You know?
No. It's better to be honestly, because there's enough bullshit in Hollywood. You know,
there really is, and I've been out here a long time, and I can tell you a lot more than what you're hearing in this hour and a half. But I will wrap it up with this. So 3 years ago, I was kind of deciding if I still wanted to make movies. I was in a very dark place. I was suicidal, and I was depressed, and I was really bummed, and I was just like, man, I don't know if I even want to like do this anymore. I've been out here for so long. I've come close so many times, and you really start to feel sorry for yourself.
Oh yeah.
And you realize that that's not going to work. Why am I doing this? Why don't I find something that might work? Why don't I find a project that could inspire me to just try one more time? And it was really tough because it's really scary because like I had done like the movie I made before All Night Skate was called Pizza and Bullets. And it took everything out of me. And, you know, at the end of the day, it took 4 years to finish that film because it was such a struggle to make independent films and to, more importantly, finish them. And we had a premiere at the film school, and it was amazing. And everyone loved the movie, but then like it was so hard after that to get people to look at it, to get agents to watch it, to get anything to happen, to get the needle moved. And so, because it's like a 45-minute film, and you can see it on YouTube or on my Vimeo channel. It's a fun movie. I'm super proud of it. We made it for nothing. And so I was hurt. I was devastated. So in the 7 years after that movie, I didn't make anything. I was making commercials. I was doing some editing. I was doing a lot of writing. I was trying to turn Pizza and Bullets into a TV show, maybe. And I was working with Sean Roldan from school a little bit. And that never really panned out. And so I was like, you know, maybe I'll make this All Night Skate thing. And I looked at this first draft I had written. It was like 15 pages. And,
what was the inspiration for that movie, by the way?
I'd worked at a roller skating rink, the one I worked at when I sold all my stuff, and I worked those 2 weekends at the Jackson Skate Center in my hometown in Missouri. And I worked there in the 90s. It was my first job, my first real job. I'd started sweeping floors and picking up stuff around there and passing out skates and worked my way up to DJ. And I loved doing that. And as a result, my movies have always been extremely music driven. And so this one was going to be no different because it was set in a skating rink. So I just sort of wrote it to some 90s music and wrote those in. And I wrote like a 15 to 20 page little script. I was like, I can do 20 pages. I know these characters well because all these characters are my friends. I'm just going to write the movie I've wanted to make my whole life, a movie about the Jackson Skate Center and about us working there. And so this movie became the last all-night skate of these characters' lives. Like they had just graduated high school, and a lot of them are about, like some of them are going to stick around, but a lot of them are going to go off into the world. And I was like, well, that's very relatable because that was me. And I want to tell the story about this filmmaker in town working at the last all-night skate with his buddies and making Mortal Kombat. And so like I started to incorporate a lot of real life stuff, but giving it a fictional kind of narrative too. So it was like semi-autobiographical. And I wrote this thing and I read the pages and I was like, well, the first draft's not good, but the core of what I want is here, I think. I can't stop thinking about this screenplay. So I kept noodling with it. And that's when I started finding crew. We were going to film it in LA at first. We had 4.5 months of pre-production, and it was a grind to try to find a rink out here that looked like it could be in the 90s. Because we couldn't shoot at our rink anymore because it had been torn down for almost 15 years. It was a flea market, and then it was torn down in 2015. So the rink we wanted, even in Missouri, was gone, the original one, sadly. And we were all devastated. And so I was like, well, maybe we'll make it out here. And then the craziest thing happened. 4.5 months in, I lost my job that I had just gotten a few months before. The whole company went under. 3 of the producers just left when they found out I had only raised $878.28. They thought I had like thousands of dollars somehow. And I was like, no, I just started fundraising. They're like, well, how are we going to get $15,000 in 5 months or 4 months from now? I'm like, we will, I promise. And they weren't too comfortable with that. So they left the project. And then suddenly this movie I was going to make in LA that was 20 pages wasn't going to be made. And I remember sitting in my car, jobless and broke, and the producers had left, and I had spent 4.5 months on this movie, and I had started envisioning the characters, and I started writing, and I was so connected to it because such a personal story. It was my story, it was my friend's story. Some of them who had died and are no longer here, they were in the script, and it was like, I was sobbing so hard, I was crying. I'm like, God, how many fucking times am I going to be here trying over and over for 20 plus years, trying? And I got so jaded about it, so like, and so sad. And I sat there and I had a good cry. And then eventually I was like, I went home and I had some libations, and I was playing video games, and I was like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try tomorrow, maybe bring it to Missouri. And then the very next day I got up and went to work, and I called some friends out there and I said, hey, what if I brought the movie home? Do you think we can make it? And they were like, yeah, try. Let's try. And so we went there, and within 2.5 weeks, I had every location I needed, including the rink. The most beautiful rink. It was amazing, Farrell. It was amazing. I got it all for free. And it was like that short film suddenly grew. And over the course of I guess the months of pre-production, I had written a feature. And so suddenly a few weeks out, a month or so out before we're going to film All Night Skate in 2018, that summer at that rink, the movie went from 20 pages to a feature film. And we had we weren't able to get everything because, again, we had a very green crew of various levels of skill. And it was a very community movie. So we knew that we were going to shoot a lot slower because we had to teach people as we went. And what we were able to create was this lightning in a bottle scenario where we were able to put this amazing, talented group of people together. 3 of the actors were from LA. They went to USC. They're amazing. And a lot of the kids were local. So everyone kind of came together and made this thing happen out of nothing. Everyone worked for free. My amazing cinematographer who shot Peach and Bullets is a dear brother of mine. He's a director as well. His name is PJ Gaynard. He shot the hell out of this. He was able to get us a decent camera package, and we were lucky in that regard that was donated to us, and we were able to film this movie with him. He loaded up his family and loaded up the U-Haul with all the camera gear he could bring. This tiny little U-Haul trailer, and that was our grip truck, our electric truck. That was everything, camera truck. And he drove across from Pittsburgh to Missouri with his family, and we all worked for free for like 3 weeks in the summer in my hometown making this film with duct tape and love. and a year, so I started editing, and because we didn't have anything, it was tough to edit because I was extending things too long. I was letting things breathe too long. I didn't have the full movie. I had most of it. And so through some screenings and some feedback, because the way I cut films, I edit all my own films, as you may remember, and the way I cut is I cut and cut and cut and cut and cut in a dark cave, and then I bring people in and they give notes, and I try to find the consistencies in everybody's notes, and that's good and bad, and I line up all the consistencies, and that's when I know what scenes are working, what ones aren't. It gives me a very clear idea. And so eventually we had somehow worked it out where we were able to go back the summer after in 2019 and shoot for like one more week on reshoots in Missouri. And we got that done. And so the way I did the reshoots was I didn't try to film what we had lost, because I knew that those scenes were gone. And most importantly, when you work with kid actors, they're going to age in a year, man. And this film takes place in one night. This film takes place in 24 hours. So I had to figure out what actors I could still use in Missouri that kind of looked the same. And, because some of the younger ones, there was no way I could add in new scenes with them because they already looked different. So that was unfortunate. But I was able to maneuver some characters within the story for the reshoots to add in these small 1.5 to 4 page scenes to kind of like fill in these brand new scenes that sort of filled in the blanks of what we were missing.
Right.
And those reshoots, Farrell, saved the film. I am not kidding. Like, if we weren't able to do them, because we did a week there, we did like 2 days of final reshoots here in Los Angeles. We doubled some stuff from Missouri because 3 of our leads were still going to USC out here for acting. And so they came and shot a couple tiny scenes. And then I just added everything together. And I've been doing the post in a COVID world.
Yeah.
And so that has been a learning experience because that took a long time. And we were going to have a premiere on the 29th, and then that sort of didn't land well, and we had to blow past that deadline. And so now it's finally going to come out like 3 years later. And well, maybe not come out, but it's finally going to be done next week. And then I don't know what's going to happen because we used a lot of copywritten 90s songs. The 90s songs are not just needle drops. They are organically ingrained in the whole thing because it's very music driven and it's at a roller rink. And if you're going to watch a roller rink at a movie set in the 90s as an audience member, especially if you're familiar with that time, you want to hear those songs the way they were, not a cover, not a, anything like that. You want to hear those songs you skated to. And so my, like, every time I showed the script to people, they'd be like, Nick, this is great, but what about all these songs you have in here? I go, yeah, I wrote to those songs. I'm setting sequences to those songs. And they're like, yeah, but they're all copywritten. I'm like, yeah, I know that. We're going to do it anyway. And because my plan was to put everything together in the final product, and then hopefully on Vimeo keep it kind of under the radar and like get some maybe some views, decent views, and then I could show that to like music supervisors and stuff down the line and maybe clear some of these songs. Yeah. That didn't happen. Vimeo kicked our movie off in like a day and a half because the traffic for the film was insane. We had almost 2,000 views in a day for a feature. This is all through word of mouth, and it was completely nuts. And then suddenly Vimeo took it down for copyright, which I was shocked by because I have other stuff on there with songs and they never took down, but I guess it was traffic that drove it. And I was devastated, man. I was like, oh my God. And so we weren't quite done. We just had some small technical tweaks that you and I would know about, but the audience at large would probably not notice once we did the final draft. And looking back on it, I wish we never would have done it that way. I wish I would have waited. I think I was emboldened by, I had released the trailer on Facebook a year later after I had released it originally on Vimeo. And when it came on Vimeo, the trailer got up like 7,000 views, which is the most anything I've ever made got. I know it's a drop in bucket compared to a lot of people, but to me, I was like, wow, that's a lot. And then I thought that's all the views that trailer is ever going to get. It's like I put it on Facebook just for giggles, and it astounded all of us because it got 16,000 more. And people started sharing it. People I know, it's crazy. People I didn't even know started sharing this thing. And they're like, oh my God, this movie looks great. Oh, I can't wait to see this. And I'm like, what have we done? This is taking on a life of its own. Like, this was our movie about our rink, and I'm glad people are responding to it. And so many people did, and it just blew us out of the water. And so what that did was that I said, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go hide underground and lick my wounds, because this was a failure, and I should have just told everybody, hey, due to COVID, we're not going to come out on the 29th, and that's on me. But it was helpful because we did get a lot of feedback, and it was insanely positive. And it wasn't just from people who knew us, it was people who didn't know us. And so after that was done, we went back into hiding, and my cinematographer and colorist and I just wrapped color last week. And I got one more pass on sound. And then I guess the goal is to try to, and the reason I say all this is because you're not going to be able to find this unless we're successful in getting it out, unfortunately. Because my goal is to try to get back online and clear some of these songs as like a favored nations deal, because the movie was made, for nothing. And it was made by the community, and it was a nonprofit film. We were sponsored by a 501c3 nonprofit, which means you can still sell the film, but like no one on it's getting paid. You know what I mean? Like it's just sort of like one of those things. And so come to find out that even though everyone was like talking to me about the music thing, because the number one rule as a filmmaker is don't put the song in unless you have the rights. They told us that our whole life. I broke that rule completely, and 33 times, and in this movie. And so my goal was if the music supervisor and the audience and the musicians and the labels see this in context in a finished product, it's much easier than me writing a letter to them and then having the music supervisor that we hired try to clear this with like can you please help me out? This is going to be great. And I'm also glad we did it that way, because some of the songs changed in the edit. You know what I mean? Like the ones we thought would work didn't. And the music supervisor that we hired said that the way that we did it was the right way, because now all the relationships he already has, he can show them the full movie, show them how long the song is in for, show them what context it's used, and show them in the complete product. He said that's the best way to do it. And so it was good to get that vindication a little bit, because it felt like I may be doing it wrong. Like I would question myself, like, am I wasting everyone's time by doing it this way? But I knew in my heart, having been a DJ there, and how much that rink meant to me, how much it was my church, and how much it gave me a safe place, and all of us a safe place to be and to be ourselves and to make lifelong friends, that it needed that soundtrack of my youth and our youth. And so I hope that like if it ever does come out, because you have a rough cut sitting on your desk, that's going to be the only way you're going to get to watch it. But if it ever does come out, I hope it does, because the brief time we were available online, it was extraordinary. We got so much positive feedback, and and so many people were thanking us for making the movie who had connections to that rink. And and it was just, I'd never seen anything like it. I never made a movie like that. Nothing I made in 30 years had landed like All Night Skate did the brief time it was out. And having worked on it for so long for free and so hard, and all the sacrifices everybody made on it, it was just really nice to hear that praise. And so I hope if the fortunes are with us, that we can put out this scrappy little indie movie that could, and hopefully it can. Hopefully it can keep going, and people will just get to see it. Because I remember, I'll wrap it up with this, Farrell. because I do see the time now. Uh,
It's all good, man.
I know, but I do want to wrap it up because I don't think anyone has this much time to hear me talk, not even me. But I did want to say that, like, I remember someone said, now that you're done with it, are you going to sell it? And I was like, nah. Like, what are you talking about? I was like, we didn't make it to sell it. I'm just going to put it up online. And that was the original plan. I was like, we made it because we wanted to make this movie, because this story had to be told. We made this for the art. Like, everyone who came together for this movie knew that we were making this for free. And so a lot of people in this town could not understand that. They could not wrap their heads around the fact that I had just spent 3 years of my life making a feature film with these people that we didn't plan on selling. We just wanted to put online. It melted their brain. It melted my brain too. And I was like, why not? Why not make it for the fucking art? Because those are the best stories.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot of that going around these days. Yeah, it is a bit of a wake up call to hear an aspiring story like that, where you're just kind of, because when was the last time you heard somebody just doing it? I mean, people, you know, they're passionate, but a lot of times sometimes they're only passionate depending on the paycheck too. So, you know.
Well, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that, because you got to put food on the table.
Absolutely.
You know? But to me, I can tell you that here's how I'm going to measure success. To me, my measure of success is I want a budget on the next movie so I can finally fucking pay people, because these people have showed up for me my whole life on all of these films and given me everything for free. And I cannot ask them to come and do that again. And I really want to pay them what they're worth and for their time. And for fuck's sake, so we can at least have Crafty that I don't have to go to pay for out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
You know, like I had to pay for Crafty with food stamps at one point because we had run out of money on this movie. And like, this movie is everything. Like we just put everything we had into it. And I know it's a gamble and it might not ever come out, but I hope we can find a way to do it, man. Because to me, Farrell, like, I'm almost ready to walk away from Hollywood again after this. Like, I don't know where I am. I am writing new scripts again. I am getting pretty excited. I got a few more I'm starting to think about. So I don't think it'll ever leave me. That's the problem. Is I could try to walk away from this business, but man, I cannot turn off that part of my brain that thinks about stories.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people don't like to think about this, but there's a lot of other places besides Hollywood to make movies. Like,
absolutely,
you know, and some of these places may unlock something for people who can't necessarily get things going in LA. I mean, I know for me personally, it was kind of a game-changing thing to move here, and things started to fall into place a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Some people, they go to Europe. Some people go to Canada. I know people moving to Canada, and there's filmmaking up there. And I mean, I don't know. I there's no easy answers. That's the thing of it. It's like, you really do have to sort of figure it out. You know, there's no Bible, and that's what Hollywood doesn't tell you, is that hey, come on in. And you get there and you're just like, you're I don't know, you're just kind of a lamb in a den of wolves. You know, a lot of good people in Hollywood that I've met, but I find that they tend to be, you know, they've got something worked out. You know, they got a relative in a high position, or they know someone, and that's the reason they moved to Hollywood, because they know them. I've seen very few examples of people who just move there and they kind of make it. I mean, it's possible, but I recommend that people do a little bit more research, especially in the digital age, where you can shoot a film and nobody knows almost what it costs, because it looks great in terms of just the cinematography. I mean, you can get a camera for hardly anything and it looks great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you know, in your hometown is probably a lot more willing to help you than people in Hollywood too. So, you know, it's a benefit to try and, instead of trying to focus on, God, I got to get out of here, looking at, hey, what do I have here in front of me?
Exactly. You nailed it on the head. It was so good to go back to the well. You know, the craziest thing is, like, the movie opens up with Nick and Trace and their friends filming Mortal Kombat, which we made as teenagers, remember, in high school. And we were standing at the same location that I stood as a 17-year-old. And now we're filming a scene where someone's playing young me with a VHS camera on their shoulder. And we got one of the other actors dressed as Raiden, and the other kid's dressed as Jax, and they're like fighting in the rock garden in the park. And I'm like, man, this is so surreal to be filming this. And like, it was cool. But the thing is like, I'm so glad I brought it home, because there's no way that it was a Missouri movie the whole time. Why am I trying to make Los Angeles or some other town look like this when I'm writing about a rink in that hometown? Why don't I go back to where that rink was? Why don't I go back to that state and capture that feel? And that was the right call, because when people watch the movie, they're like, oh my God, it feels like the 90s. You guys did it. You did it. I don't know how you did it, but you did it. And I was so worried, because I thought everything looked like community theater, you know, because like our budget was so low. I was like, oh man, people in Hollywood are going to tear me apart when they see this. And the opposite happened. Because again, I was holding myself up to the standards that they kept drilling into our heads, that it's not good enough, you know.
Right.
But the thing is no one in this town knows anything. They don't know. They don't know what's good enough, because they don't know themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, man. I mean, it was great catching up with you. You know, and hearing about your adventures. I think in the end, you know, when we all pass along to the great whatever, you know, it feels like strife now, but then I think, especially that I've gotten older, I kind of look back on things that I've gone through, and I'm all the wiser for it. And I kind of look at it as I'd rather have a more I think it's a more interesting life than sort of sitting around and doing what you're programmed to do. I'd rather take the risk and have possibly good rewards down the road, and the reward could just be doing what you love. You don't necessarily have to be a big, famous, successful filmmaker.
Exactly.
It's in the doing, as David Lynch said.
Yep. All day. And that's what I learned on this movie.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'll wrap it up quick. Pizza and Bullets, I think on some level I was making it for them, because I was like, oh yeah, we could turn this into a feature or maybe a series or something. And so while it still had the heart that I like to put in my movies, it you know, I think I expected something out of it, because we were doing it the right way. And we were doing everything the way that they told me to do it. And that doesn't guarantee a win. Captain Jean-Luc Picard says you can do everything right in this life and still fail, right? So that's the thing, is that there is no failure. You just need to get started. The only failure is you not starting at all. You need to start. Write it down. Go around your town. Go around where you are. Get an iPhone. Start shooting. Start shooting right now. Start shooting today. Because a lot of people are like, I'm going to make that one movie and then get the Marvel movie. No, you need to make about 40 shorter films and other stuff, and always be exercising your craft, and then make a big movie.
Yeah.
You got to make the smart. You got to get that one pebble again and put that pebble in the bucket. You can't just dump all the rocks at the same time. And I think people just want that instant gratification, because we live in that world today. Right. And so what you got to realize is you're not going to get that, even though so many more people are making movies. Again, Hollywood is not cultivating anything to get behind that. So
and you only see the result. You don't see, you know, again, like you said in those interviews, you see they got their movie made. They got these glamorous red carpet premieres. You don't see the grit and the grime, because 99% of it is not glamorous.
Exactly.
And most of the people that you see, or a lot of the people that you see who you think are super successful, yeah, they are, in terms of they get their name out there, but a lot of them are struggling. I mean, they're filmmakers who are great. You hear they make a movie, 5 years goes by and they haven't made anything else, and you wonder what happened. What happened was the business.
It's the business, exactly. It can break you. You have to be more resilient than that. But I hate that it can break you. Why? Why do we make it that way? Why don't we make it fun? Why don't we inspire people instead of tearing them down in this business? And I hate that.
It's because it's run by
Corporations.
yeah, business people. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a dollar, but I think they've taken a great American art form, and it's I don't know. I think it's kind of gotten to the point where, like I said, this announcement by Disney recently about their slate, I wasn't excited by any of it. Any of
I
it.
was. I'm
I know
sorry.
you were. I know you're the guy. But for me, in terms of just as a filmmaker, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay. I mean, but it was just like I want to see something else. You know what I mean? And
Right,
it's
right.
like it's so. But I don't know. Just to wrap things up. But yeah. So what's the film called again? All Night Skate, right?
All Night Skate, NITE. All Night Skate,
Okay.
NITE.
Okay.
And then on the you can go check out a bunch of the other Vimeo stuff. I put everything on my Vimeo channel, including the VHS stuff, so you can look at it and go, oh yeah, I can do that. If they can make VHS movies like this, I can do that. Just to show you that yes, you can get started. That's all on vimeo.com/spoon pictures. At spoon, like spoon.
Like there is no spoon.
Yeah, there is no spoon. Whoa. And then there's I have some stuff on YouTube, but don't worry about that. Vimeo is where it's at for me. And then there's Instagram at filmmaker Nick, all one word, 2 M's. And then yeah,
Okay.
I think that's it for me.
Cool.
With
Yeah.
that,
No, that was great, man.